People that are going to do whatever it takes to get someone else to Jesus. If you think about missions, that's really what missions is. It's laying aside a lot of things so that somebody else can meet Jesus. It might be expensive, it may be impractical, a little bit uncomfortable for those in the house, but it's okay because we're going to do whatever it takes. We are going to tear the roof. You know, I speak in other places as well, and there's always that feeling of the requisite, kind of like you got to, say good things about the host and that kind of stuff. And, it's not hard. It's actually not hard this morning because it's true. Dave has been, we're old enough now to say we're lifelong friends. That's, wow. He said in first service that I was a lot older than him. Let's correct that. It's not a lot. Not maybe a year. But I remember my first meeting of Dave, Pastor Dave. I was exiting an elevator, and Pastor Dave was walking towards the elevator. I had never met him before. We were both, it was 1985, I believe. We were both freshmen. So not freshmen, I wasn't really a freshman, but we were students there, first-year students. And the normal, when you pass somebody that, you're in Bible school, you pass somebody in the hallway, hey, how are you doing? That kind of normal greeting that you do. Well, I did that. Like I said, hey, how are you doing? And Dave responded back, not so good. And then he kept walking, and I kept walking. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. So I turned around, you felt like I can't just keep walking. I've got to stop. And so we talked. I don't even remember what was going on back then, but it was a divine appointment. We have not, we don't spend weeks together all the time necessarily. But last night we got to dinner at this cafe, and it's like we sit down. I haven't seen you in months and months. And we sit down, and it's like we just pick right up where we left off. There's this spiritual connection, and God knew that, and God knew that I needed that. Dave has been a friend. One of the reasons why we're in Iowa is because of Dave. Actually, it's his fault because we were in California. I was enjoying the dirt bike riding and surfing and all that kind of stuff, and I had asked him. We were considering pastoring a church, and I had never done a resume. And so I sent Dave the resume I wrote up, asking for his input because he was a seasoned pastor, in my opinion, and I wasn't. And so I sent him my resume, and he gave me some pointers I corrected. I didn't really send it to anybody here in Iowa. I sent it to some churches in Texas. But I'm sitting at one of my son's football games. I'm in the parking lot. Actually, it was practice. I was watching it from my truck, and I get this phone call from Glenn Reynolds, and he says, hey, Pastor Green, we've received your resume. We've received your application to plant a church in Iowa City. I'm like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. Wait, Idaho, Ohio, where is this place? And sure enough, I think you had passed the resume on to Glenn, and I did not know that. And so I'm on this three-way call with Richard Arrowood, with Glenn Reynolds, and some presbyter out in Quad Cities, and they're interviewing me for church plant. I'm thinking, I'm 42 years old. I'm too old to church plant. I don't want to. I've done that before. I don't want to do it again. Plus, I've got teenage sons. I don't want to do this thing, But you know how God has a way, and he just convinced me that this is where we needed to be, and that was 19 years ago. 19 years ago, 2 months ago, I was actually, I don't know where the pulpit was then, but I was here in this church, and talking about a vision to plant a church in Iowa City, and you as Heartland supported us to get that started, and so thank you so much. This has been an amazing journey, and I credit a lot of this perseverance of the faith to my good friend Dave Olson. You have a great pastor here, by the way, just so you know. Amen? Yeah. When I when I am feeling like I need a word from God, like I'm feeling pulled in different directions, and I need to call somebody, Dave's one of the first guys that I'll call. He's been that kind of friend to me. So, love you, Dave. Thanks for the invite. Thanks for the honor to be here in your house. And can I say, this is a great church. My goodness, you guys are amazing. Like I'm observing, I'm seeing young people over here dancing and shouting and praising God. And I mean, just praise God. What a house, what a house. We love you guys. Well, real quick, I am married. So just kind of quick introductions. I am married. My wife, Christy. Christy and Kathy were roommates, and she wanted to be here, but we have 6 grandkids, and 5 of them live near us. And my son works overnight, so he ended up asking my wife to, watch the grandkids overnight. So it just wasn't a good idea to bring 3 grandkids with us on this trip. So we'll make it happen. But so I am married, been married for 37 years. I have 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. When we were missionaries in Bangladesh, I used to introduce them this way. I'm going to use a little bit of Bengali. Hopefully somebody here knows some Bengali. I would introduce my kids. Amar 3 jon chele ache, amar boro chele bhumikompor. Amar দ্বিতীয় chele ঝড়. Amar তৃতীয় chele ঘূর্ণিঝড়. And then I would just, a whole crowd would laugh, and all that. You want to know what that means? Okay. I would say, I have 3 sons. This is before my daughter was born. I have 3 sons. My oldest son is an earthquake. My second son is hurricane, and my third son is tornado. And they would laugh because they knew how sons were. So my sons now are 36, 34, and 32. And then, while we were in Bangladesh, the Lord blessed us with a little girl. And that's another, I'm standing here, just realized you were instrumental in that too. No, I'm sorry, Dave. That didn't sound right. That did not sound right. Let me clarify, since I'm here. I had, yes. I will clarify so that there's no doubt of what's going on. Shoot, that's what happened. That's why you have to have notes, okay? So after 3 sons, Assemblies of God require, you can only have 3 kids while you're a missionary. And so, I did the requisite surgery, what I mean. And then Pastor Dave and I were talking, and this was several years later, and my wife was really upset. We didn't have a girl, and I'm like, I have a good chance of not a great chance of getting a girl, especially since, And so Pastor Dave said, well, I know a doctor. Remember that? I don't know if you remember that. I know a doctor in Arkansas, and he does it really cheap. I'm like, okay, for pastors and missionaries. And so sure enough, I had, we were missionaries, so very low salary. So I was like, it could not cost over $1,000. Because if it costs over $1,000, I just can't afford it, And so I called the doctor up. I don't even remember his name. I call the doctor up. He interviews me over the phone, and I say, all the stuff. And he said, my assistant will call you back tomorrow to give you my determination. I'm like, okay, good. So she calls back the next morning and says, Doctor, whatever his name, Dr. So-and-so wants you to come to this town, check into this hotel. You're going to spend the night there. We're going to do the surgery, and then you'll stay one more night, and after surgery, he'll follow up and then release you. And my big question in my mind was, well, yeah, okay, wait, good. How much, I said, it's free because you're a missionary. I'm like, I guess I can't say no. I was looking for an excuse to get out. But nonetheless, the surgery happened. And then a year later, I had a little daughter, a little baby girl born in Bangladesh. Her Bangladeshi nickname is Choiti, which means spring because she was born in April. And so, yeah, so I have 3 sons that live, 2 that live in North Liberty and Cedar Rapids, another one that lives in Knoxville, Tennessee, is a PA. And then my daughter's a captain in the Air Force down in Tucson, Arizona. She's an aviator, and she loves her job. She's doing a great job. But I guess I have to finish the story. So after Caitlin, we didn't want to have any more kids. So The doctor that, the hospital where my daughter was born was a village hospital in a little place called Malumgat in Bangladesh. And the OBGYN doctor was there, and they had a surgeon in the whole hospital. But he was a cardiothoracic surgeon. And so when Christy asked about, we need to reverse the plumbing here, he said, "Oh, I think I could do it." So I am not kidding you. I am not kidding you. We were in the embassy clinic in Dhaka City. I'm on a, little bed, examination bed, and he's got all this stuff on, he's geared up for surgery, and he's got this gigantic manual sitting out like that, and he's like, my wife had so much faith in that, she went ahead and took care of it herself too. So anyway, yeah, this has nothing to do with what I want to preach about today, but I think it's established that Dave and I have a long-standing connection, and he's been very influential in my life. So anyway, all right, we're going to talk a little bit about, out of Luke chapter 5, and talk a little bit about what is it going to take to bring people to Jesus. When Jesus started his ministry, he made a very simple invitation. He walked up to, one of the examples is he walked up to Levi. We know him as Matthew from the Gospel of Matthew. He walks up to Levi's tax collecting booth. He's flanked by a couple Roman soldiers. Tax collectors were despised individuals in that culture. Despised. In fact, if you read through the Gospel, you'll find it says that as it refers to sinners, there was sinners and tax collectors. Like they even separate the two. Like you're a sinner, man, if you're a tax, you're even lower than that. That's how despised they were in this culture. They were traitors to their own people. So Jesus walks up to this person who is essentially extorting money out of his own people, and he says, "Hey, follow me." Very simple, clear invitation. Follow me. And that invitation wasn't an invitation to attend church regularly or make sure you tithe in the offering box as it goes by, or it wasn't about, having some kind of proper theology so that you can argue with other people about it. That wasn't the invitation. It was an invitation to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ. Fully devoted follower. You would give everything up. All the motifs throughout the gospel are exactly that. It's complete surrender. I lay it all down. I am completely yours. That's the invitation of Christ, is to follow him. And so today we're going to look at a story. One of the things about this invitation of Jesus is that there's this, as you embrace that, as you surrender completely, you feel this passion to bring people to Jesus. That you can't help it. It becomes consuming to you. In fact, throughout you read the book of Acts, you baptism of the Holy Spirit, the Pentecost happens, and what happens? Immediately they go out. Immediately they're going to difficult places, distant places, as the Spirit of God would fill them. So we're going to look at this story in Luke 5. It's a story. So what I'm asking you to do as we look at this passage is I'm asking you to kind of put on your creative story hat. Most of the world, and this probably is, for me, I grew up in the country of Panama. I'm half Latino. My mother's Panamanian. My dad's American. And maybe that's part of some of the cultural influence that I have, is that when I read the stories in the gospel, I have to imagine myself in those stories. I have to imagine the story. It's for me to be able to understand, to comprehend it. It's not just, ones and zeros for me. It really is about, God, what's the story here? What are you trying to communicate? What's the heart behind it? And so we're going to look at a story in Luke chapter 5, and it's a great story. And I want you to kind of, as we're reading it, read it as a story. Imagine the story, okay? Now, a couple tests of a great story is that you when you read a great story, you're kind of like, man, I wish I was there. Like the feeding of the 5,000, When I read that story, it's miraculous. It's amazing, how Jesus takes, 5 loaves and 2 fishes. They weren't like whales, by the way. They were small, dried fish. They weren't like these 100-foot long, baguettes. There's 5 little rice cakes or wheat barley cakes and 2 little fish. And he miraculously breaks and feeds. The story tells us 5,000 men, maybe 12, 15,000 people. Miraculously feeds this crowd. And when I read that story, I'm like, man, wouldn't it have been so awesome to be there? To have experienced that? To see the miracle of multiplication happening right in front of my eyes. So that's what makes a good story. Is that as you're reading the story, you want to be there, right? I think another test of a good story is that you find yourself identifying with one of the characters in the story. Like when I think about the movie Braveheart, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that here in this church, but when I think about the movie Braveheart, I imagine myself as William Wallace on the side of some Scottish hill rallying his troops together. Like my wife will look at me and say, are you watching that again? Like you've seen it 25 times. I know, but I'm William Wallace. You identify with a character. For some of you, it might be like Luke Skywalker. You're fighting the forces of darkness. And maybe some others of you, it's Pedro, in Napoleon Dynamite. I don't know. Anyways, a great story has these elements. A great story has these elements. You wish you were there and you identify with the characters in the story. And so as we read this story, I want you to kind of imagine yourself there and who do you identify with in this story? This takes place in the town of Capernaum. It was Peter's hometown. It's a little fishing village on the Sea of Galilee. And I could just imagine Peter and his friends just having a great old time. It was a country town, fishing and hunting and playing, and he's growing up there. He loved his little town. It wasn't a remote town necessarily, but it was out of the city for the most part. It was just a little fishing village, really. And then Peter's life gets completely upended when suddenly this unconventional, interesting rabbi shows up and says to him these words, "Follow me. Follow me." I suspect that there are some of you in this room that you've heard those words. He's called you, follow me. And so this story, as we're reading this story, you're going to see some scholars think that the entire story that we're about to read takes place actually in Peter's physical home where he lived. We're not exactly sure about that. But what we do know, I want you to imagine this scene, what we do know is that there's a crowd there right now. There's some out-of-towners who've come in, some religious leaders who have come to check Jesus out. They're not followers, they're not seekers, they're not sympathizers, they're skeptics. They feel obligated to check Jesus out because there's this rumor that he healed a leper. Now, it was a very uncommon miracle, actually, in those days. There was no documented healing of a leper since Naaman got healed in the Old Testament. And so these religious leaders taught that there would be 3 miraculous signs of the Messiah. And one of those was healing a leper. And so they feel this obligation to check out this Messiah to see if he truly is the Messiah. There's always Messiahs popping up. And so is this really the Messiah? And so they come very skeptical, very investigative, and they're having a hard time. They just don't believe that he is the Messiah. I mean, he's such an unconventional rabbi. Like he doesn't hobnob with the other Pharisees. He's not into, all the religious law, so to speak. He allows his disciples a little bit of leeway. They can eat on the Sabbath. They can pick up their mats on the Sabbath. They can do things like that. So they're a little bit concerned. Is this really the Messiah? We don't know if we believe that. So the story starts in Luke chapter 5, verse 17. It says, one day, Jesus was teaching, again, likely in Simon Peter's house, and Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there. They had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem. And so there was these religious leaders who have come from all over the place to investigate. And the power of the Lord was with Jesus to heal the sick. Now, when we read this passage, typically, this is where we land. We land with the power of the Lord was there to heal the sick. And then what did he do? He healed a man who was paralyzed, right? And so we focus in on the power of the Lord, which is a good thing to do. We do need to focus in on the power of the Lord. But oftentimes we miss the other part of this story. Okay. Some men, the story continues, and I hope you have your creative caps on, you're listening to this as a story. Some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. So here's the characters in this story. We have some Pharisees, some religious leaders who are there to investigate Jesus. We have Jesus himself. And then we have these friends with a paralyzed friend. When they could not find a way, let that stay in your brain a little bit. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof, lowered him on a mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. Earlier service, I preached this, and I didn't say this in the earlier service, but I remembered as a missionary in Bangladesh, I remember one time heading out to a village called Ramshil. To get to Ramshil was like when I got to Ramshil, so you know how the Bible says go to the ends of the earth? I think I was there at the ends of the earth, literally. Because to get to Ramshil, you had to, I lived in Dhaka City, so you had to, I drove our van from Dhaka City to a town called Gopalganj. In Gopalganj, I'd get off and I'd take a little scooter, it was like a 3-wheel scooter, up this really bumpy gravel road all the way to the end of that road. Then I would get on a 3-wheel flatbed rickshaw, and sit on the back, as you know, and you pay these guys all the way to the end of that road, and there at the end of that road would be a boat, and then I get on a boat to get to Ramshil. And so I remember going to Ramshil one time, and Pastor Monoranjan was a great man of prayer, and a man that prayed for the sick, and they were healed. And I remember getting there, like I'm getting off the boat. I have got these big work boots on. I wish I would have brought pictures. I didn't. I have these big work boots on, and they're like totally staring at my boots like, what kind of shoes are those? You know, they were like totally freaked out by it because, you know, it's a lot of mud. Anyways, I get off, I'm getting out of the boat, and I hear this commotion going on in the church. And they literally had a person on a mat that was paralyzed that they were praying for. And by the end of that weekend, that person walked home. That's pretty powerful. I mean, it's awesome. And so this story here that we're about to read is very similar to that. So it happened then, it happens today, right? Amen? It does. And so these guys, they do this crazy thing. They make a decision to basically do whatever it takes to bring their friend to Jesus. So what would it have been like to be there? Imagine that. What would it have been like to be there? I want you to imagine there's a packed house. There's these religious leaders that have made their way in because they're coming to investigate Jesus. Of course, they're the religious leaders. They feel like they're very important, very special. So where are they sitting? On the front row. They're the VIPs. So they're in this house. Jesus is teaching. Get an image here. Jesus is teaching here. VIPs sitting on the front row, these religious leaders. And then it tells us in the story that it was crowded. So crowded that these friends couldn't get to Jesus. So picture the house, full of people, standing room only. People on the outside looking through the windows, trying to listen into what Jesus was saying. It's a crowded house. Verse 18 tells us that these men that carry this paralytic to come see Jesus, they couldn't get in the house. It tells us in the Gospel of Mark that it was 4 guys. So we know there's 4 men who have come to bring their friend to Jesus, right? Now, being a paralytic in that day was a death sentence. There were no wheelchairs. There was no place you can go to get government assistance because you had a disability. I mean, if you were a paralytic in that day, you had no chance unless you had some friends who would do pretty much everything for you. And that's probably the story of this man. And so there's these 4 friends who seem to be that for this man. I don't know what caused them to go take their friend to Jesus. Maybe they heard, maybe the word was getting out that there was a man who healed a leper. And they thought, well, if he heals a leper, certainly he can heal my friend who's paralyzed, right? And so they make a decision to take their friend to see Jesus. Now, I'm not exactly sure how excited this paralyzed guy was, this paralytic was. I mean, you know, there's like this field trip that's going on, and he can't walk. So he has to be carried there. And not to mention, he probably has already tried this multiple times. There's been many people who claim to be healers that he's probably gone to for healing, and nothing has happened. He doesn't want to be disappointed again. He doesn't want to go there and, you know, somebody say, do this and do that, and oh, nothing happens, go home. And then on top of that, in this religious structure that they had, the way they saw this paralytic man was that either he or his parents had done something wrong, had sinned, which caused him to be paralyzed. And so in their mindset, the way they thought was, we're despised, and we're not even sure if God likes us, because look at what's going on with me. So why would he want to get exposed to that? Why would he want to go once more to a place where there's a bunch of religious leaders that are going to look down on him, and maybe somebody will pray for him, and maybe they'll do some kind of ointments or whatever, but nothing happens? Why would he? I don't think he was very excited, but his friends, they weren't going to take no for an answer. They were going to do whatever it takes to take him to Jesus. So they get to the house. They can't get in. The Bible tells us that they try to get in, but they couldn't. That little verb there, the tense of that verb is that they tried and they tried and they tried. Like they made effort, but they couldn't get in. There just doesn't seem to be a way into the house. And so one of them has this brilliant idea. He says, you know what? Let's get up on the roof. The other friend's like, wait, why? I said, well, we can't get in this way. Let's just cut a hole in the roof and let's lower him through the roof. I'm sure the paralyzed guy was like, wait, no, you can't take me up on a roof. I don't know. But they have this crazy idea. And suddenly when I read this story and I get myself in the story, I like all of a sudden get transplanted back to Louisiana, where all of my in-laws live. Because clearly, this is a redneck move. Sorry, Kathy. Kathy's not. She's just from Mississippi. My in-laws are great people. I mean, very educated as well. Very, but they're rednecks. I got some pictures actually. I'll show you. This is Christy's family. My wife Christy. Her father is the guy with the white T-shirt. Big grin. He's got a big hat on, and then my wife Christy is to this side of him. And then she has 5 younger siblings, 2 sisters and 3 brothers. And so they are, just by looking at the picture, you could tell, right? I mean, that's my father. My father, I've only ever seen my father-in-law with a hat on, a white T-shirt, shorts, and tube socks. I've never seen him dressed any other way except at our wedding. Seriously, I'm not joking about that. It's true. This next picture is them 46 years later. I told you they're rednecks. 46 years later, this was at my father-in-law's funeral last year, and so they had cigars in honor of my father-in-law, just so that you don't think that they're really bad people or crazy people. Because there's some rednecks in this room, I'm sure, but just so you don't think that there's really bad people. This is my brother-in-law, Danny, right here's next picture. He is a redneck, but you know what? If you know anything about the stripes on his sleeve there, you know that they don't just give those to you. He's had to do a lot of training, a lot of leading. He's a very, very, very capable person. And so when I think of this story, I think of my redneck brothers-in-law. Like, this is something that they would try to pull. Like, this is something they would, and I could see myself in that story. Like, I could see us, literally, I could just hear Danny say, hey, bro, let's get up on the roof. And Mickey and Ronnie are like, I don't know, Danny, what's going on? They're a little bit skeptical of Danny, because Danny always has ideas. They don't always pan out, They're just good ideas sometimes. Sometimes they do pan out, but not always. And so a little skeptical say, hey, we're going to get up on the roof. We're going to cut a hole through the ceiling so that our friend could get to Jesus, right? I like how verse 19 says, when they could not find a way. And so the question I want us to wrestle with is what do you do when you can't find a way? What do you do when it seems impossible? I know our default answer is just pray. Yes, pray. What do you do when you can't find a way? Like you have this sacred assignment and there just doesn't seem to be a way. Like you've been called to someone or something, but it just seems like it's impossible. What do you do when you can't find a way? Well, I guess you could go home and just not do anything, say, I tried. But then every time you see and you look at your friend, you think to yourself, should I have tried harder? Or maybe you can say, we'll put it off for later, but then how long does your friend have to wait before he receives what he needs from Jesus? You see, now is the time. Now is the time, but it doesn't seem like a good idea. It doesn't seem like a good plan. It seems a bit impractical, to get up on a roof. It's a little bit distracting for others in the house. Can you imagine if you were sitting here in service and then somebody starts digging a hole through the roof? Do you think we would be distracted? I think we would. It can be a little bit embarrassing as well. Who wants to be known as a person who basically cut a hole in a stranger's roof? It's expensive. And what if it doesn't work? What if Jesus gets angry with them? Like, what if Jesus is like, hey, come on, guys, you just wait your turn. I mean, some people might think, well, listen, why would Jesus concern himself with that one person when he has a whole house full of people that are there and taking notes and very attentive? So what do you do when you can't find a way? Well, you don't quit. And let me just say, Heartland, this is what we as a church should be known for. People that are going to do whatever it takes to get someone else to Jesus. If you think about missions, that's really what missions is laying aside a lot of things so that somebody else can meet Jesus. It might be expensive, it may be impractical, a little bit uncomfortable for those in the house. But it's okay because we're going to do whatever it takes. We are going to tear the roof. Here's what tear the roof means. It means you have a bias towards action. That you're not just going to simply sit around and say, hopefully one day somebody will do something. That you will feel engaged. You'll be moved to action. And it's because there's this urgency. Jesus is coming back. And we don't have time to wait. We can't put it off for later. We can't say, well, when I'm finally financially set, then I'm going to get involved. We have a bias towards action right now. Tear the roof means that we value risky innovation. They couldn't find a way into the house. Too many of us, we find ourselves in this place spiritually in a lot of different ways, or even when you get challenged on missions, and you say, I want to, you feel it, but you just can't get past it's the crowd, it's just blocking you can't get in. But we don't innovate. Here's what I think, I didn't say this first service, but here's what I think sometimes innovation is. I have we started, back in 2019, I felt this conviction at LIFEChurch. I was tired of getting phone calls from missionaries, and I had to say to them, I don't have any more money to support you with. Sorry, we've exhausted our finances. And I started, I just didn't like that. It was bothering me. But we literally did not have money. And the Lord spoke to me very clearly and said, look, Rich, you take care of my business, I'll take care of the house. That's all. And so we introduced something a lot of people use. It's called Kingdom Builders. It's above and beyond giving. And we said, hey, we're gonna go all out for Jesus. And so we did. First year we raised $180,000, and then it moved on since then. We've since through Kingdom Builders have funded about $2.9 million in projects. But let me say, here's the innovation part. Somebody in our church felt so compelled, but they knew they couldn't do anything. So they literally downsized their house. They sold a $800,000 home, moved into a $250,000 home, which in Iowa City, that's a small little box. And they got rid of some properties. They changed their vehicles. And they have, in the last 5 years, given almost $1 million to Kingdom Builders. Yeah, amen. Here's what I'm getting. You know why? Because they couldn't find a way, and they became innovative. We're going to figure out how to get one more person to Jesus. Tearing the roof means that we go to places that are difficult to get to, because that's how we will get them to Jesus. Because we go to difficult places. We go places even in your own community here that are close to you, in Polk County. We go to places where literally the doors are closed, like Bangladesh or Malaysia or Indonesia. Were you in Malaysia or in Indonesia recently? Indonesia recently, where the doors literally are closed. That's what tear the roof means. So we're going to tear the roof. We know that that's what it will take to fulfill the assignment that has been given to us, to reach this generation, to reach people for Jesus Christ. And so I identify with these guys. When I read that story, I think of myself up on that roof, lowering a friend down. But can I pause here for a second and tell you the truth? Too often, though, I find myself as just one of the crowd. Too often I find myself on the front seat taking notes from Jesus. Not so concerned about those that are outside of the house, but more concerned about my own experience with Christ. So are we the crowd, or are we the friends? In Western culture, I said this before, coming here this morning actually, I drove by 2 big churches to come to Heartland. I think they're big. The buildings are big. And in Western culture, we have choices. In Western culture, we could say, hey, I don't like that one church. They have a mosh pit. I don't know. I don't want to go there. I want to go to the other one, Or others are like, hey, they don't have a mosh pit. I'm going to the one that has the mosh pit. We have those kind of choices. And what happens subtly in that kind of environment is suddenly it's all about my own experience in the house. It's all about what I'm going to get out of it. And I'm asking you in this message today, what I'm asking you is to move away from what you want and think about the millions and billions who have yet to hear the gospel one single time. What are you going to do to get them to Jesus? So tear the roof means that we're going to go to great lengths to make sure that those outside of the house come inside the house. We're going to do whatever it takes. We're going to fill the Lord's house. As I think about this story, I imagine, what some of the people were thinking as the roof is being torn through. You imagine those Pharisees sitting on the front row, and suddenly stuff starts coming through and there's this paralyzed guy that's being dropped down through the roof. And they're like, hey, wait a minute. I was here first, okay? Like I was here first, as if being first gives you any more value in the eyes of Christ or any more preference in the eyes of Christ. The dust and the dirt fly everywhere and somebody chimes in and says, hey, you know what? This house is messy. I'm going to a different house. There's that accountant guy sitting in the back watching the roof get torn through and he's like, hey, that's expensive to do that. Who's going to pay for it? I don't know if we should be spending money like that. A group of them roll their eyes like, yeah, a bunch of Gen Zers coming through the roof. Yeah. So as a church, we want to be bold and courageous. We want to be unconventional and innovative. We want to have a bias for action. So when there's no way, we hike up on the roof and we tear a hole through the roof. That's what we do. Can you imagine? Can you imagine for all of you here who call, what's my time? Sorry. Dave wants to say, all right, I'll try to get through here. But can you imagine if those of you that are here call Heartland your home? If you made the choice today to leverage all of your resources, your energy, your time, so that one person could come to Jesus, can you imagine what would happen in this house if you just rallied together to make that happen? I mean, God would do some amazing things. There's a question that we need to wrestle with. So am I one of the crowd, or am I one of the friends on the roof? There's a phrase that was coined by a psychologist. It's called the bystander effect. That's how they say it, the bystander effect. It's this phenomenon that happens when you see something happen right in front of you, but then you don't do anything about it. It's called the bystander effect. Probably one of the most famous examples of that is the story of Kitty Genovese in New York City in 1964, where she was stabbed to death right across the street from her apartment. And there was 38 people that saw it happen. Nobody called the police. Now, when you hear me say that, you would think, oh, that's terrible. Well, a psychologist would say, well, those people weren't evil necessarily. It's just that they were paralyzed by what's called the bystander effect. Something happens. There's a lot of theories about the bystander effect. One of them is an assumption that someone else will do something. That, there's 38 people here. Somebody certainly will call the police. I don't want to call the police, but somebody else will. Or you can be in this big room right here, and there's hundreds of people in this room, and you could say, man, there's a lot of people here. Somebody else will do it. Like somebody else will go on that mission trip. Somebody else who has more money will give to missions. Somebody else will serve the kids. Somebody else will preach. Somebody else will reach the next generation. Somebody else will do something about human trafficking. Somebody else. It's this idea that I see it, I feel it, but somebody else will do something. Another reason is this rationalization that there's nothing that I can do. Like, I care, but I'm not qualified. I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough resources. I don't have enough talents. Eugene Peterson, who you might know who Eugene Peterson is, he's the one who did the paraphrase the message. He says that when people fail to engage in ministry, oftentimes it's because of this sickness called Afghanistitis. That impactful things for God, real opportunities to make a difference in the world are on the other side of the world, like Afghanistan. In extreme situations, and when we see the extreme situation, we look at our little small life and we think, well, I can't do that. Somebody else will have to do that. Probably the most common reason, though, behind the bystander effect is fear. We're just afraid. Afraid to get involved. It's messy. Afraid to make a commitment to missions because, well, what if I give to missions, I won't have enough at the end of the month for my own, for my own groceries. Afraid to commit ourselves to giving our lives over in service to Jesus on the mission field because what if he sends me to Afghanistan? We're afraid. Probably one of the most disturbing examples of the bystander effect, though, is the story of Kevin Carter. He was a South African photojournalist that would go to these war-torn countries and he'd take these pictures, these images of just incredible images of war, and then, would get those published. There was one that he took, a famous photograph that some of you may have seen it before. It actually won a Pulitzer Prize. It was featured on Time Magazine's top 100 photos of the century. It's this picture right here. It's taken in 1992. It's the image of a Sudanese girl trying to make it to a refugee camp. The story goes that Kevin Carter, the photojournalist, was trying to take that picture and was waiting. He waited 20 minutes because he wanted the vulture to spread its wings because he thought that would be a better photograph to take with a vulture spreading his wings. Well, the vulture never did, so he took the picture and he went off to another, he scared the vulture off and went off to another photo, to shoot some more pictures. New York Times bought that picture in 1993. That was the year that my family and I landed in Bangladesh. And this picture had a huge impact in the world. People saw it. It was on Time Magazine's cover. People saw it. and they were just disgusted with the realities of war were just so in their face. And then suddenly, questions started to arise, like, well, what happened to the girl? And they started asking Kevin Carter, what happened to the girl? And he's like, he didn't do anything. He left, and he tried to explain himself, like, you don't understand. This is a war-torn country. She was about gone anyways. I couldn't have done anything. So he wins a Pulitzer for this picture, and then a year later, he takes his life. He says a lot of things in his note that he left behind, that, all the atrocities he's seen that were tormenting him. But there's this one little line. He says, I wish I would have done more. I think sometimes we can mask our lack of doing more with how amazing it is in the house, feeling his presence, feeling his love, feeling his healing power in us. Sometimes we make a choice between being in the house and enjoying that over the needs of a little girl like that in Sudan. My time's up, so I'm going to end, but my question to you is, are you in the crowd, or are you on the roof? Are you prioritizing your needs over the needs outside of the house, of those outside of the house? I stand before you. I'm conflicted in my heart because I have a great church that loves me, pays me well. I have a thriving church. And but a month ago, I was in Bangladesh, and my church is larger than all the Christians in the entire city of 26 million people. Are you on the roof, or are you in the crowd? And I know those aren't mutually exclusive. I know you can be in the crowd and be compassionate and chasing after those who are lost. And my challenge to you this morning is that you would do that. Let's not make any more excuses. Amen?
Hey, thanks for watching. At Heartland Church, we love to worship the Lord and we love His Word. And we live stream both every Sunday morning. We would love to have you join us. In fact, if you could jump on and subscribe to our YouTube channel, you could make sure that you don't miss any of the services. We'd love to have you join us live or in person every week. See you next time.